Hi guys, it's Paula and I hope you're doing well. This is going to be the 9-month, I believe, update for the Panning Games. The Panning Games is a Pantastic Ladies collaboration. It started back on August 1st, 2018, and so there are only 3 months left in this project. The premise of this project was to put 50 items in a box and in 30 seconds draw out 24 items to pan over the next year that represent the 24 tributes from the Hunger Games. And because I was feeling very overwhelmed at that time with the amount of projects I already had going on, I decided to put 50 never ever before used eyeshadow palettes in a box. Yes, I had 50 never used eyeshadow palettes. I put them all in a box and I pulled 24 of those in 30 seconds. Took closer to a minute, but I tried. And I've been working on 2 every month just to get some use out of them. My goal is to use each of the 2 palettes 1 time during that month. So far, I've achieved that goal out of all the 9 months. It's been close a couple times, like last minute, don't forget to use that palette before the update kind of a situation, but I've made it. When you're panning a palette, it's hard to deter from your goal of getting the most use out of that palette as possible, but I'm really glad that I have taken the opportunity to familiarize myself with some of the palettes that I'd never used before in my stash. For the month of April, I decided to work on these 2 palettes right here. This is the Urban Decay Shadow Box. It looks like this. And the It Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette, it looks like this right here. I paired these 2 palettes together because there were so many shimmery eyeshadows in this palette and there were so many mattes in this palette. This is basically an all matte or satin finish eyeshadow palette with one shadow down here called the Transforming Pearl eyeshadow, which you can use to add shimmer or to layer on top of any one of these or mix in with any one of these to create a shimmer eyeshadow. I did not play around with that too much. Every time I used one of these palettes, I used the other one. I really did stick to my original plan of using these 2 palettes in conjunction with each other, and today is the 3rd time I used them during the past month and all together. If you are interested in seeing how I got this eye look right here, I will have a little quick demonstration at the end of this video if you are interested. Let's start with the Urban Decay Shadow Box. Out of the 2, this is the one I was least interested in. These shadows are just not calling my name, and I did not use every single shadow in this palette over the 3 times that I used this palette. I used Bordello, Sin, Baked Cowboy, and a combination of Indo and Moon Shadow to create like a teal look. So I used about half of the shadows in this palette over the 3 times that I used it. Bordello was the one I was most excited about, and it ended up being a huge disappointment. The shadow just is not showing up on my skin. I applied it with my finger, which should have given it quite a bit of impact, and I did not use a glitter glue or anything like that, but it just blended away to nothing. It barely showed up on my eyelid. I will show you that in the demonstration. It just didn't really do anything special at all, and it was a huge disappointment since I was looking forward to that shade so much. I was really impressed, however, with Baked Cowboy. I thought that shadow really stood alone and created a nice eyelid color for a look that I did using it. When I mixed these 2 shades together, the green and the blue, I used them on my lower lash line, and unfortunately that day in particular I had a lot of transfer and fallout underneath my eyes throughout the day, and it wasn't just like one thing. Like at 9 o'clock in the morning I looked in the mirror, saw a little speckle of blue, wiped it away and kept going. It was like every single time I went to the bathroom I had more and more blue eyeshadow under my eye, and so I don't know if it was those 2 shadows that caused that, but I suspect it was. I did pair them with an eyeliner, so it could have been the eyeliner that did that, but I think it was these two culprits right here. And that's probably how I'd like to use those shadows the most frequently, like as a pop of color on my lower lash line. And unfortunately, if they don't stay put and they keep traveling downward, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to avoid that. I'm a big fan of this shade right here called Sin. It's, I believe, the same shadow that's in the original Naked palette, and it's one of my favorites. It's just a great brow bone highlight for me. It's a little bit of a pinky shade, like a pinky champagne. I know some people have to look out for a shade like that with a little bit of pink for their skin tone, but it works just fine for me, and it makes a beautiful brow bone highlight and an inner corner highlight. I am wearing it today on my inner corners. Smog is a favorite. That's why I didn't use it, because I already know I love that shadow. That's also in the original Urban Decay palette. It's just a perfect like one shadow look. Overall, I'm really glad I got a chance to familiarize myself with this palette in particular, but I'm left feeling like meh about it. Like, it's okay, but not something I'm like craving in my life. Like, let me get back to this palette right now because it's so amazing. Not so much. But there's some good shadows in there. I could definitely see myself depotting that palette down the road and mixing some of those shadows in with other shadows, because part of the problem with this palette is I don't feel like it's the most perfect standalone palette, because there's not enough of the kind of crease and transition shades that I like in my eye looks. So I actually would probably prefer to depot this and mix it in with some Z palettes where I can create a more cohesive eye look for the kind of eye look I like to create. Okay, let's move on to the IT Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette. I bought this palette years ago based on Emily Noel 83's recommendation. She really loved this palette for a long time. I'm sure she still loves it, but she doesn't talk about it very much anymore. But she's the reason I bought this. When I talked about working on this at last month's update, I received a comment from my friend Erin from Australia, and she mentioned that she had a lot of trouble with this palette because when she paired too many shadows together, it just really got muddy. So having that information in advance, I avoided putting too many of these shadows on my eyelid at one time. I would pretty much just stick with one shadow or two shadows and stop right there so that I didn't muddy up the works. The shadows I ended up using were Soulful, right there, Sunset, Iconic, and the Transforming Pearl shade. Sunset was surprisingly pigmented. I was shocked by how much color payoff I got the first time I applied it, but it did blend out nicely, and I actually enjoyed that color very much. It's definitely my favorite of the bunch. I also really enjoyed this Transforming Pearl shade. I think it makes a gorgeous brow bone highlight. I did not use it as a transformer, which is why it's in the palette, to turn any of these basic matte shadows into a shimmery shadow. So I didn't use it for that purpose, because I pretty much used most of the shadows as crease and outer corner shades. Unfortunately, Soulful, the one that I thought would be one of my favorites in the palette, ended up being a bit of a disappointment. I thought it was gonna have a lot more like rosy pink in it, and it ended up just pulling brown on me. I will show you that in the demonstration at the end of this video, but yeah, it just looked brown. And now that I look at it, I think, yeah, I guess it really is just a brown, but I still see so much like of a peachy pink in it, and that just didn't translate onto my eyes. It just looked brown. So that's too bad. These shadows are really soft. I can't believe that I managed to wear off the majority of the stamping on this Transforming Pearl shade just using it 3 times. Like, that never happens. And there's so many shadows in this palette that I just didn't get to in the 3 times I used it. I did the exact same look 2 out of the 3 times, and the 3rd time I used this one. So I don't feel like I got a ton of information about this palette, but I found it really helpful that Erin told me that these will muddy up if you use them all together. So watch yourself, and I just stuck with a couple of shades in each look, and that worked out just fine. I also do not really consider this a standalone palette. Similar to the Urban Decay Shadow Box, this has too many shimmers and therefore makes it not a standalone palette, and this has too many mattes and therefore makes it not a standalone palette. I would again consider depotting this and incorporating it into a Z palette so that I could create a more cohesive palette for me and the way I like to do makeup. This alone is something I'm not going to pull for because I'm always going to need something else to go with it. I'm fine with that. I have plenty of single eyeshadows and Colourpop shadows and L'Oreal pigments that I can pair with these matte palettes to create a pop of shimmer on the eyelid. I would definitely consider depotting that one too, to create combinations that just work more for me than that palette does by itself. All right, 2 more palettes have been used. It's time to pick 2 more unused palettes from the original 24 and work on those for the next month. It's weird only having 6 palettes left to choose from. I pulled all remaining 6 palettes out this morning, looked at all of them and paired them together. And the 2 that I ended up pulling for the month of May are Colourpops You Had Me at Hello and the MAC Eyeshadow Times 15 Cool Neutral. Typically in previous months when I was pairing eyeshadows together, I was looking for like opposites, like this one's matte, this one's shimmer, this one's cool, this one's warm. And it was nice to have that contrast. This time I paired 2 palettes that are very similar in a lot of ways. They both have a decent mix of matte and shimmer, and both of them are leaning cool toned and a little bit rosy. So this is the MAC one right here, and you can see you have these lovely rosy shades over there. And then of course Colourpops You Had Me at Hello has a very similar color story. There's some silvers, some rosy pinks, almost leaning like burgundy shades. So yes, overall I feel like these 2 palettes are the most complementary out of the pairs that I've picked in these different rounds and updates for this project. I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can create with these 2 and to kind of compare them directly to each other, since they do have a lot of similarities. I have a feeling that the shimmery metallic shades in the Colourpop palette are going to blow away the ones in the MAC palette, but we will see what I really think when I get them on my eyes. Maybe I'll surprise myself. The shades in this MAC palette, if you don't know, are Flounce, Sweet Allure, Sun Tweaked, After Dusk, Blackberry, Pick Me Up, Cozy Gray, Crushed Clove, Deception, and Brune. This is Silver Fog, French Clay, Cumulus, Pearled Earth, and Black Tide. The only shadow out of this entire palette that I'm familiar with is Brune. I remember watching OG YouTube videos circa 2009 where people used Brune all the time, either as an eyebrow powder or just something for the crease and outer V. The rest of these shadows I've never heard of and I'm not familiar with at all. I've had it for a few years. I've never used it even once. It's time to familiarize myself with those eyeshadows and see what I think. All right, guys, that is it for this video. I hope you stick around to watch the quick little demonstration of how I got this eye look and how the shadows in the Urban Decay Shadow Box and the IT Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette perform together on my eyes. So I will cut to that clip right now. Good morning, guys. Let's jump into the eye look. I am going to start with this IT Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette. All right, now that I'm nice and close, I'm gonna take this eyeshadow right here, Transforming Pearl, and apply that onto my brow bone. This is a beautiful shadow that highlights my brow bone without looking like I'm putting a white eyeshadow on it. Just a really nice formula. And just a little bit on the inner corners. I'm going to apply something on top of that later, but okay, next I'm going to take the shade right here called Soulful, and I'm going to apply that into my crease. This shadow has a lot of pink in it, but just not quite as much pink as I would have hoped. I always am looking for like a real dusty pink like the one in my Pan That palette. This just wasn't quite pink enough, so I'm going to use that shadow next in my transition area. Yeah, so at the end of the day, that shadow, even though it looks really like peachy pink to me in the pan, especially compared to the other shades in the pan, it just looks brown on my eyelids, which was a little bit disappointing. I was hoping for more pink in that eyeshadow on my eyelid. So next I am going to take my favorite little dusty pink shadow, this old one from Mary Kay, and I'm going to apply that in my transition area. This is the shadow that that palette is missing, in my humble opinion. Did you guys see what my nails are doing? I painted my nails with that aqua green light shadow from Kale Polish, but because I dyed my hair when I washed my hair this morning, I have an interesting ombre effect going on, and I don't know if I love it or hate it. Certainly isn't an aqua green. Okay, very good. See? All right, next I'm going to go in with my Urban Decay palette. This is the Shadow Box palette, and I am going to apply Bordello all over my eyelid. I'm just going to apply it with my finger. It is this shade right there. Uh-oh, mirror sticker, guys, get ready. I really don't use these mirrors ever. I do my makeup in the bathroom every single day in front of a gigantic mirror. It's only when I'm filming that I need these mirrors. The shadow is a little bit underwhelming. I was hoping for more of something. I don't know what. It just looks, it's a little too close to my skin tone. It doesn't really pop. I ended up covering it up in the look that I did on the day that I used these eyeshadows, and that's what I'm gonna do again today. It was basically a base that you're not even gonna notice when this look is finished, which is kind of unfortunate. I'm also gonna pop the shade Sin on my inner corner highlight, and I'm just gonna apply that with my pinky finger. Okay, I'm gonna go back in with my IT Cosmetics palette, and I'm gonna run Soulful under my lower lash line. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of this shade down here called Iconic. It's got a lot of purple in it. It's like a plummy shade. And I'm going to apply that in my outer third of my eyelid and the outer third of my lower lash line as well. That shade makes a really nice lower lash line color. It's my kind of depth and tone for a nice lower lash line shade. All right, into Iconic, that deeper purple shade. Okay, I might go back in with that deep plum shade one more time, but first I'm going to apply a little bit of Colourpop's Birthday Wish. This is in my Go for the Gold project, and I just felt like this combination of colors was the best match with this shadow, so I figured I'd pair them together and get some use out of this Colourpop shadow as well. It ended up pairing really nicely, and I was amazed when I actually got 2 compliments from coworkers about my look that day, because that generally doesn't happen. I have some pretty fabulous coworkers, and I don't know, I was just shocked when they both noticed. That just adds so much more life to my eyelid than the shadow in that Urban Decay palette. This is what I needed, and I couldn't get it from that Mauve Bordello shade, but I got it from Colourpop, as always. I never fail. All right, and now that I've applied that, let me see if I want to deepen up my outer V a little bit more. Yeah, sure, why not? Gotta look fab to take round to Ninja Warriors today. All right, that is pretty much it for the shadows. I'm gonna add a lip product, some mascara, and an eyeliner, and I'll be right back. All right, guys, this is the finished look. I added on Too Faced Fig. That's the melted liquid lipstick that's in my Project 10 Uses. And I added a liquid eyeliner, the Stila one. I gave myself just the tiniest little baby wing and a mascara. That's it. I'm not sure what made this look stand out to my coworkers, if it's the fact that I added a bolder lip with the eyeliner, with the liquid eyeliner, or what, but when I got 2 compliments in one day on this look, I knew this was the one I had to recreate for you guys. So this is the finished look. Unfortunately, I think I could have achieved this look without this palette altogether. I think just using the IT Cosmetics palette along with this Colourpop Super Shock Shadow could have given me the exact same look. This Bordello shade was the one I was possibly looking forward to the most out of this palette, and it didn't pop on my eyelid at all. So that's kind of disappointing. Maybe on a different skin tone it would do its job, but on my skin tone it just kind of disappeared. So regardless, I have 2 more palettes in my stash that have now been played with a little bit and used, and they're not brand new anymore, and I'm really happy about that. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.